The very first donation that was made to the Other Side Academy, one of the first significant ones, was a $5,000 donation from a group called 100 Women Who Care. With that, we bought a moving truck. That moving truck today has generated $3 million in income to support the Other Side Academy over the last 9 years. So when you go back to a donor with that kind of a stewardship report and say, here's what's been leveraged.
Wow.
And as you know, within that truck, every single day, there are 5 or 6 men who are getting mentored and learning to work and learning to be honest and decent, and it's transforming lives. So it isn't even about the $3 million. It's about the hundreds of lives that have been in the cab of that truck. And the same kind of things will happen in the village, in the home that will be placed next week with your name on it.
Welcome to Motivational Mondays, Conversations with David Ibarra. Our guest today is Joseph Grenny. Welcome, Joseph.
So good to be with you, David.
Great. I've been looking forward to a conversation with you, Joseph, and I want to just dive in, and I want you to share with us a little bit about you, the person, the early years, and then how is it that you got into training and writing books?
Well, if you go way back into my deep, dark past, my first entrepreneurial experience was back in 1976. I'd drive down the peninsula to Palo Alto and purchase kit computers from Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and go solder them together, create business software, and try to sell them. So I was a 16-year-old entrepreneur in the Bay Area, and I think that experience is what really helped me to realize that business success or failure is less about technology than it is behavior. It's about the people. So I sell these great computers, and some people use them well and some people use them badly, and that kind of drew me eventually into the direction of social science.
Tell me a little bit about more social science. What did you do to get ready to be an expert and a author of so many different books? Crucial Conversations is my favorite, but how is it that you got in to be one of the foremost experts in our country on this subject?
Well, like a lot of us, it was a chance encounter with a remarkable person that was a mentor to me. So Stephen Covey, back in 1982, was leaving his university post and starting a company. And I thought that I was probably a business person at this point. I'd had a business, was running a business, and so I went to this business seminar. And as he spoke, I was a young man still at the time, it opened up this whole field of organizational behavior. That there's an opportunity for people to study how people act in organizations, and that you could have a consequential impact on not only organizational performance, but people's lives through that kind of discipline. So I redirected my studies, changed from physics and computer science into social science, and here I am with you today.
Well, that's perfect. Where is it that you, what university did you attend?
Brigham Young University. So that's where I was as a physics major, and then they have a very strong program in organizational behavior, a long tradition of scholars that have made enormous contributions. So it's a great place to study that field.
And when you said Stephen Covey, I was assuming that's where you met Mr. Covey?
Yes,
when
he
he
was
a professor
right here in
there?
Salt Lake City at Abravanel Hall when he gave his seminar. And he wasn't my professor. He had already kind of left the university at that point, but that's how I first encountered him.
Well, his work has been dynamic, no doubt. And when he bought or merged or whatever it was, the Franklin Group, which was Senator Bennett's company, and if I remember, their lead instructor was a gentleman by the name of Hiram Smith.
That's right.
And then he brings so much more to it, and then it just ballooned. What happened? What did you do within the Covey Group? And then tell me a little bit about how long it was. And then you left and did what?
Yeah, so I was with him for about 5 years, and it was a fledgling little company. In fact, we couldn't make payroll for most of the years that I was there. It was a real struggle to try to get attention for this concept. But Stephen's main argument was that character matters, that who you are as a human being matters as much as your competence and skills. And that message, it seems like the world was hungry for, and so eventually the word started to get out. So my job there was to try to just help the company survive and thrive. I created the first week-long training, leadership training course based on 7 habits and principle-centered leadership. I was responsible for about 30 to 40% of the company's revenue, bringing it in and helping manage those clients for a period of time. But Eventually, I realized that my calling was more in the field of creating human change, not just delivering training. I needed to learn more about influence, and some of this was more of a spiritual calling than anything else. I really felt prompted that for some unknown reason that would probably have to do with my future, that I needed to learn everything the world had to teach about human change and influence. And so I left in 1990, started a company that today is called Crucial Learning. We've got about 15,000 trainers around the world that teach some of the different intellectual products, but it's given me a chance to...
15,000.
Yeah.
And I believe you're in China as well.
We are, yeah, very heavily. And but I think a lot of the reason is because the world gets it that solving the problems that we face today is not just about coming up with better pills or better tech. It's about changing our human culture. The way people show up really is what determines the fate of the planet and the fate of humanity. And the social sciences and organizational behavior have a lot to say on those topics, so I've been blessed to be part of that discipline.
So tell me, when you started your own company, how did you go about it? Tell me what was some of your obstacles you had to come, and when you started to have your first, second, third successes, what were they?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I knew I needed to do it, and so it was really a feeling of responsibility more than ambition or confidence that got me there. And when we left, I call it my 5-year-long headache. I was newlywed, had 2 small children from my wife's previous marriage, felt this enormous burden and responsibility to try to be a good provider for the family. And here we were struggling to try to just make sure we could make payroll on a regular basis at Crucial Learning. And But again, if you're solving important human problems, success is out there. The degree to which you succeed as a business is not really just based upon wit, it's based upon service. And if you're doing something that matters, the world will ask more of you. And so when we went to business leaders and said, do you believe that the behavior of your people is a critical success factor in you achieving your mission as an organization, there were ready yeses everywhere. We ended up working with AT&T and Lockheed Martin and Federal Express and American Express, and you name the organization. I think about 2,000 of the Fortune 3,000 have been clients of ours over the years.
Wow.
And it's because we're determined to make sure that what we do makes a difference, that we actually change behavior in organizations, and that it has a profound impact on business results. And that gave me a chance to learn more and more about how human beings tick, which eventually led me to some of the work you're aware of today.
Well, when did you write your first book?
Well, the first book we wrote was called The Balancing Act, and probably sold about 8,000 copies or something like that. And I was certain it was the only book I'd ever get to write, so we treated it like a big giant bucket and threw everything that we wanted to into it, including the kitchen sink. It was 530 pages long and a tough read, but it was a go-to-school book. It was a chance for me to learn how to write. And I had one of the best mentors in the world, Carrie Patterson, my business partner, who was a merciless coach to me. Really was not going to flinch on giving me feedback about when I was writing long and boring and self-centered. And so that book was a practice ground, and that prepared us later to write Crucial Conversations, which has been one of the more important ones we've written.
Now, Crucial Conversations, you're being a little bit modest. If I'm not mistaken, New York Times bestsellers list.
It is, yeah, about 6 million copies in print around the world, and
6 million.
And so it's had some impact, and it's been a blessing too. I feel like that book is what opened the doors to do many of the philanthropic things that I want to do today, because people were aware of it, and so I had some credibility coming in. But the central premise of that book is that one of the most important factors that shapes our lives is how we show up in moments of emotional and political risk. That when we need to have a conversation with somebody that we have trepidation about, that tends to shape our relationships, shape our teams, and even shape our organizations more than any other moment. So we spent thousands and thousands of hours watching how people deal with those moments to try to see what we could learn to help us all out.
Well, most of the viewers that would watch this program will have already read your book, because it's part of the curriculum that we use now. This is a must read, because a crucial conversation isn't a mean conversation, and it isn't a conversation that is a feel-good. It's a crucial conversation that can you give us some examples about that?
Yeah, no question. You think about it at home, and it's any time you disagree with your spouse or your significant other. And so it doesn't even have to be some high-stakes issue. It just has to do with the fact that she wants the toilet paper to roll one way and I want it to roll the other. And when emotions rise and opinions vary, it either damages or strengthens the relationship depending on how you show up. At work, it could be about performance feedback. It could be a difference on strategic direction in the company. It could be a new policy that you think is a brilliant idea and somebody else thinks is disastrous. And so the issue is not just that you disagree, it's how we disagree. And if you show up in a way that ruptures the relationship, even if you get the result you want, you pay long-term costs for that. And so we tried to study moments where we found that people that had even less power were able to talk with people who had more power about significant disagreements, character deficits they had, weaknesses that they had, and get their point across and be heard if they approached it in the right way. And that's the gift that the book tries to give.
Well, it is a great read, and more important than that, when I ever hear somebody say to me about the couple of books that I've written, boy, what a nice read. The next question I like to ask is, did you use any of it? Once you put that into action, that's when it makes a difference. And many people have heard me say that success is 3 things must happen in order to achieve it. You have to have the capital, talent, and then time. Utilization of how you use your time creates success. And I found that in all of your books. It kind of zeroed in on the same kind of an elements. I want to move on to some of the bigger successes that you've had have been outside of the business arena, in that some of the things you decided that was your calling, the Other Side Academy. How did that come about? What thought occurred to get involved with the Other Side Academy? And then share with our listeners, what is the Other Side Academy?
Yeah, happy to. And you've been an important part of the success there. We're grateful to you forever, David Ibarra, for all you've done to help open the path and support our growth at the Other Side Academy. So it really was the convergence of that inspiration I felt back in 1990 to leave Stephen Covey and start this organization and learn about influence. And along the way, one of the books that I co-authored is called Crucial Influence. And there's a case study in there about a place called Delancey Street. For a guy that studies organizations, just a junkie on management, to show up at a place that's run by 500 convicts in San Francisco that is the best run organization I have ever visited, bar none. And I've worked with Nobel laureates and tech billionaires and people all over the world that you'd think were the best managers that you could imagine. And here are these bunch of felons in San Francisco running a place called Delancey Street that should be in prison. Collectively, they were facing hundreds and hundreds of years of incarceration. But instead, they're running social enterprises and supporting themselves and transforming their lives. It blew my mind. So park that for a second. I wrote the book. There's the case study. And then I got 2 boys that started getting into drugs and going in and out of jail. And for a parent that was desperate to try to help my boys, but oftentimes in those circumstances, the last person they want help from is their own parent.
Right.
And so my philosophy is, if you can't fight the battle you want, you get into the war. And we got into the war. And so I knew about this model, and I felt a special responsibility that more of the world needed it. So we tried to replicate Delancey Street, which is now called the Other Side Academy, here in Salt Lake City. There's also a campus in Denver, Colorado. We've now got about 250 students who would otherwise be serving about 2,000 years of incarceration.
Wow.
They run 4 social enterprises that have been award-winning social enterprises, won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And imagine sitting in a 5-star hotel ballroom with a bunch of convicts who are beating these entrepreneurs, these well-heeled elites from Utah at their own game.
Wow.
And it was a proud moment to watch that happen. And for 9 years now, I've been able to see this transformation and how there is limitless human potential even amongst the most marginalized populations. And what you and I tend to do when we try to help people, we tend to expect too little rather than too much. And when you expect too little, that's exactly what you get. The Other Side Academy expects an enormous amount when people arrive. It expects them to change. It expects them to become leaders. It expects them to operate at a level of morality that I had never lived at in my life. And so I'm a better man for being part of this community.
Take a moment and picture in your mind igniting your child's journey to lifelong success from an early age. With Yes, Our Kids Can, this vision becomes a reality right from preschool. Don't miss this chance to shape your child's path towards extraordinary success. Enroll in the Yes, Our Kids Can University now and witness the remarkable impact it can have on your child's growth and development. Secure your child's bright future today. Sign up now by clicking the link below. You know, when I first met you and David DeRocher, the thing that I noticed when I came to visit the Other Side Academy and you invited me to have dinner with the leaders and the students.
I remember the night.
And it was, and I was looking, it just looked like a beehive. And the one thing that I really felt was a sense of direction and pride. And when I heard 30 months, a commitment, 30 months, and the student isn't going to have to pay anything except for the time. And I thought to myself right away, this is going to work because it takes about 30 months to reseed the subconscious to have new beliefs. And I heard David say, you've got to practice being honest until you become honest. You got to practice every day to be accountable until you become accountable. And I was listening to him give this speech, and I said, I've never seen it better. And I've said before, whenever I get down, and everybody does, and you pivot to a negative or disbelief thought, I like to go to the Other Side Academy and just mingle and have dinner, and I walk out of there feeling so good. So tell me, can you where do you get your leaders for the Other Side Academy? The group leaders, are they psychologists? Are they where do they come from?
Thanks for the softball, David. Yeah, and as you know well from being there, I've spent my career studying influence. And if you're trying to influence people that require deep change, there is nobody with more credibility, with more potential for having an impact than people that have already traversed that same path. So all of our leaders are peer leaders. All of them grew up at the Other Side Academy. All of them sat on the bench one day, asked for an interview, stayed for 2.5 years, stayed an extra year, stayed a year after that for staff and training, and have shown that they're willing to dedicate their lives to saving the very kind of people they used to be. You get to watch this, as I do, again and again, as somebody can sit down with an individual who's a liar, a thief, a manipulator, a narcissist, and call them out on their behavior, and there's no defensiveness. There's no feeling of shame about it, because the person calling them out was that same person just a year or two before. And so those conversations are incredibly impactful. When people come to the Other Side Academy, they experience what I call involuntary hope. They don't have to consciously say, is there hope for me here? They can't not hope when they're there, because they're seeing people they knew from jail or from prison just a couple of years before, and they're looking at them as changed human beings. You can't not know that a different path is available to you when you see scores and scores of examples of people that have done precisely that. Then the only question is, do you want it or not?
Well, I tell you what, when I met David and I met you, and I began writing my new book, Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich, I thought it all, Dr. Hill had as his 7th principle, positive mental attitude. And as a disciple of Dr. Hill's work, and now the largest licensee of Think and Grow Rich seminars in the world, I thought, I have the right to reorder these. And it thought to me that number 7 is the principle. It's number 1. The power of thought has to be the first principle understood, or you don't gain the desire to want something to change. And I thought, who is it that I could tell a story about with the power of thought, showing that the same person, the same mind, doing something really not healthy, and right
That was a nice
and
way of saying
destroying other people's lives. And then that same person, that same brain, saving lives. And Dave DeRocher came to mind. So he's the example I shared, and what an unbelievable success story he is.
And I'll tell you, David, the way you told the story is modest, too. So the horror of his life, the monstrous person that he was before, he took me once on what I call the Dave DeRocher Destruction Tour. So we were in Huntington Beach, California. I was giving a speech, and he was going to be part of that with me. And he said, well, let me take you to some of the old haunts. And I don't know the man that he introduced me to that day. He took me to place after place after place where he shoved a gun in somebody's mouth or put him in the trunk of a car, or that his life was at risk because he was being set up in a drug deal. And it was just absolutely foreign to me. You couldn't have a more stark example of what's possible when human beings change their thinking, when human beings are willing to put in the work for personal transformation than the man I know and the man that I was introduced to that day. Absolutely incredible.
Well, what a great human being. Now, I wanted to tell our audience a little bit about the statistical success rate of the Other Side Academy.
Yeah, so when students first arrive, they sit on a bench. They go through kind of a probationary period. Those who make it through the first 2 or 3 weeks, and there's significant fallout at that point because they're realizing what they're signing up for. Mm-hmm. But of those that make it through that period and become a freshman at the Other Side Academy, 74% will complete, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it. We have no locked doors. We've got no guards. You can walk out anytime you want. You'll go do your jail sentence after that, but you can leave. But 74% will stay for the 2.5 years. If they do, 72% of those will be drug-free, crime-free, and employed over subsequent years. We've been tracking data now for 9 years, so that's the limit of our data. 72%.
Now, I don't believe there's another program out there that can talk about overcoming addiction like that 72%. I've never heard of one.
And the story gets even better. So about half of our students will ask to stay longer. Now imagine that. These are people that have been forgiven of their outstanding sentences, gone back in front of the judge, and the judge says, go live a good life. They could walk away. But about half will come back and say, I got more work to do. Can I stay? Wow. And so they stay for a third year voluntarily, partly because they've fallen in love with helping other people. And they're now younger brothers and sisters in the house that they want to continue to mentor. And partly because they have work that they need to do themselves. Those people that stay for a year or more longer, it's a 92% success rate.
Unbelievable.
And so this is how it works. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes this kind of a peer community to help us change. And you see this in your work. Right. When people have mentors, when people can see examples, exemplars in their lives of those who have accomplished the same things, they're remarkably successful.
Well, it's becoming a disciple and understanding the purpose and the purpose to serve. And that's what I hear from your leaders at the Other Side. They just get all, you can just feel the energy when they talk about what they're doing, the purpose of what they're doing.
Yeah.
I wanted to shift for a minute. Well, no, I want to connect back to the Other Side Academy and where it's located. When it was first announced that this program was going to be in the neighborhood that it was, what kind of reaction did you get from the neighborhood?
Terror, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you imagine if somebody said to you, we want to take 150 felons and have them move into a house next door to you, most people would be a little nervous. And as you're aware, we've had tremendous problems with homelessness and how it's been managed here in Salt Lake City. And so now, at the same time that homelessness is a challenge, we're saying that we're going to concentrate this population in a pretty high-end area of Salt Lake City, very, very visible. But the way it happened was a few people at a time. First there were 2 and 4 and then 8, and the population grew. But within weeks, they recognized this was a different house.
Right.
Because we were out shoveling people's walks. We were mowing their lawns. We were watching the neighborhood. We were patrolling for safety purposes. And when the chief of police started to report the crime rate had dropped because we had arrived, people started to take note.
Well,
by the time we had a public meeting and all of our neighbors were asked to come out and comment on whether or not they wanted us to have a permit to be able to stay where we were staying, 55 neighbors turned out, and every single one of them said, don't you dare make them move.
that was just absolutely unbelievable. I heard that story. I'd come over to do a debate actually, and then David told me the neighbor next door was a senior living facility, and she was ready to retire, and she wanted that facility to go to the Other Side Academy for growth.
She did. She sold it to us on very favorable terms, and we're grateful we had it because it became our quarantine house during COVID when we hadn't quite finished the remodel. We wouldn't have been able to accept anybody during the COVID period because it would have put our population at risk if we hadn't had that house. But yeah, for her, with a very vulnerable population, to say that we feel safer because we're next door to the Other Side Academy tells you about who we are.
And now as you go by and you look at it and at the cleanliness of it, it is an example of the way something should be, and absolutely unbelievable in walkable, safe, and just the atmosphere. And you can tell the neighbors love having you there.
Yeah, if I can one-up my own story here for a second, we recently had a community council meeting in the same area that you're in here, in your lovely building. And we were asking for permission to build a 50-unit apartment complex at a building we'd acquired across the street so that we could move 50 homeless people in as part of the Other Side Village. And again, you would expect, as we've seen here in Utah, people to be very nervous when that occurred. The entire community was supportive of it. They said, if the Other Side Academy is doing this, we trust them. This is going to be an asset, not a liability. And that's the kind of trust that this wonderful population has built.
Well, that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about next, the Other Side Village. Tell us about how that happened and what exactly is it?
So the Other Side Village is a 430-home community for the chronically homeless that is self-reliant, that's important, that is safe, and that is beautiful. And so it's a sober community. It comes in two parts. So we take people off the streets who are chronically homeless. This isn't people who are temporarily because they lost a job or missed a paycheck. These are people that have been living for years and years on the streets, many of whom have significant mental health challenges. And so it's the toughest to help population. They come to a prep school, and they live there for 6 to 12 months to relearn life. And once they've relearned life, they've learned how to work, to get along with people, to solve problems, to communicate, and lots of things that you lose when you're in this chaotic experience on the street. They get off drugs, they get sober, and then they get to move into this gorgeous village. And the village, when it's finished, will have 430 homes, about 500 or so residents, a 600-seat performance hall, a donut shop, social enterprise space, businesses, a grocery store. It's basically downtown Disney and then Beverly Hills in the background. A beautiful residential neighborhood that is access controlled so we can keep the population safe, that is a democratic therapeutic community, so literally run by the residents. And the remarkable thing was, on the west side here of Salt Lake, where they've been concerned that the city continues to push problems, when we let them know that it was us coming and what the plan was, we had 90% support.
Wow.
90% support from the adjacent neighborhoods. And where do you hear that happen?
And when you look at the at the architectural design, when you hear the story of the Other Side Village, it's and then you hear that the purpose is to make it the neighborhood that is the example of what a community should be. We've lost that in America. And getting that back, it just absolutely warmed my heart. And I'm going to do something that normally I don't. For anyone viewing, I believed in it strong enough.
From the beginning.
That it just hit me. I got to do something. So I bought a house, fully furnished.
One of the first ones in the entire community.
And donated it. And it's called Vivalisto Manor. And it is after my book, Live Ready. And I'll tell you, those that are listening, one of the greatest things in our lives is connecting to something that is really going to make a difference. I was told, Joseph, the worst waste of money you can do is give it to a nonprofit because most don't know what to do with it. But I can tell you something. The Other Side Academy and the Other Side Village, they've gone against everything success. Your money, if you decided to give a donation to the Other Side Village, the Other Side Academy, is going to be well used, and it will multiply and make a difference that you would not even understand, because you can't count the lives that get changed and the changes they make in other lives. I am just a real big fan of what you do.
You have been a real big partner from day one. And I'll tell you, you may not be aware of this, but next week, your home will be placed on its foundation in the village. There is a graduate of the Other Side Prep School right now who is designated to be the first resident of that home. And so it's happening. The second thing I'll tell you, by way of support for what you just said, the very first donation that was made to the Other Side Academy, one of the first significant ones, was a $5,000 donation from a group called 100 Women Who Care. With that, we bought a moving truck. That moving truck today has generated $3 million in income to support the Other Side Academy over the last 9 years. So when you go back to a donor with that kind of a stewardship report and say, here's what's been leveraged.
Wow.
And as you know, within that truck, every single day, there are 5 or 6 men who are getting mentored and learning to work and learning to be honest and decent, and it's transforming lives. So it isn't even about the $3 million. It's about the hundreds of lives that have been in the cab of that truck. And the same kind of things will happen in the village, in the home that will be placed next week with your name on it.
Well, thank you for all you do. And I can't help but ask one more thing. How is the Other Side Academy largely funded?
Today, it's 100% operationally funded by our students. In fact, the first $50,000 donation to build the Other Side Village came from the Other Side Academy. It came from 150 felons in Salt Lake City who would otherwise be incarcerated, to the tune of about $50 million of expense to the public purse. Instead, they made a donation. So they are 100% supported by their own funds. So capital funds, when we grow, when we purchase a new campus or a new building, that's done by outside donations. So philanthropy is still very helpful.
So how does somebody get involved with the Other Side Academy and the Other Side Village?
If you're part of the folks listening that are from outside of Utah or Colorado, go to the Other Side Village or the Other Side Academy, learn about the model, come and visit. You're welcome to provide financial support as well. If you're here locally, reach out to us, contact us. We'll give you a tour, and we can talk about ways of volunteering as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you. As a gift, I wanted to give you a copy of my new book, Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich. And Joseph, thank you so much for what you do, the impact you have made on others, and for being on our show today.
We're grateful to, and I need to say in closing too, that of all the speakers we've had over the last 9 years that have come and had an impact on our students, none have exceeded you. You speak with a credibility, a moral authority, and a clarity that's been a great blessing to our students, and we're grateful for your friendship.
Thank you.